Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a wonderful day ahead of you. Today, I have for you a very interesting and exciting Game Week 29 team selection, which will include a -8. And I've got a feeling that many of you are going to have a successful, hugely successful game week. So I very much look forward to hearing about that in the comments section on Sunday in Transfer Plans. And please do drop comments below because I will enjoy reading them. Today, I have, of course, my Game Week 29 team selection, which will showcase the -8 I've taken. It will try to persuade you to take more hits than you maybe are currently thinking of, simply because I think it's to be optimal in many cases. And I will showcase my team for Game Week 30 with a little bit of strategy talk attached to it as well. Aside from that, I would really appreciate if you drop a like on the video and equally subscribe, because we are now less than 40 away from 7,000 subscribers, and there are thousands of you who watch regularly who have not pressed it. But aside from that, let's hop into the video. Team selection process will certainly be exciting this time around as I discuss each individual prospect for the upcoming asset this game week, simply because I know a lot of you will be considering a goalkeeper transfer, or a defender transfer, or a midfield transfer, forward transfer. And as such, I think it's best to cover all bases and leave no stone unturned. So let's start with Jordan Pickford, at home to West Ham. And I spoke about this in Everything You Need to Know. And I think this is, of all of them, the game which is most associated to gambling when it comes to picking a result. There are a lot of variables which contradict each other as opposed to who should win and who should lose. For example, Everton at home in good form. You think about their structure. You think about the players that they've got defensively. You think, okay, maybe with West Ham's system, like, it's not one where I would say they have numeric advantages in those final spaces, just given, even if the fullback, wing backs are really high up. It's not really like the traditional 3-2-5 where they have the opposition block pinned and they're able to maneuver the block in such a way where they can create a pocket of space and then hurt teams from there. It's more so like if they're gonna hurt teams, it's gonna be in transition as opposed to like creating numeric advantages, and that's difficult against this Everton side. But then on the flip side, you would say they have more attacking talent in like Kudus and Bowen. And equally, you would say this West Ham side, with this 3 at the back system, are very difficult to break down. And do Everton have the necessary weapons to do so if West Ham are to go deep? Maybe, maybe not. So I would say this has very much got the makings, theoretically, and anything can happen in football, of like a 0-0, 1-0, and like 1-0 to either side, right? Just a moment of magic. And like, who knows, maybe 2-1, right? But I assume it'll be low scoring. And as such, to go for one of these teams, I think would be a bit of a risk. I know the odds have it as Everton in front. For me, it's more so a coin flip. And personally, unless you have strong conviction, I would just be avoiding on free hit 29. And when it comes to bringing other assets in, I don't mind it because obviously there is upside should you be able to keep a clean sheet. For example, Pickford will probably rack up some saves if he does, and then potentially get some bonus. But I still will be looking to target the likes of Man United, Aït-Nouri to an extent, Aina to an extent, Vardiol to an extent, ahead of Pickford, simply for the reason that I really do think you're playing roulette. Playing roulette with the way that I interpret the fixture. Moving on to the defenders, and there is much to discuss from this section. You'll see that Konate is on the bench, naturally, because he does not have a fixture. And the lineup, the defensive lineup, including the goalkeeper, is actually really strong, especially if you take it in accordance to Rob T's model. The clean sheet projections in terms of the odds are really healthy for this defensive unit. Then you consider Robinson's assist threat, Gabriel's goal threat, Ryan Aït-Nouri's goal and assist threat, and Pickford's whole potential. And I would be expectant of a good result from this back four. At least one of them should hit. And I really should get a haul out of one of these four, I think, game week. I think I'm deserving of it. Burgess on the bench. He'll stay there. And now let's go on to the prospects. When I bought Ryan Aït-Nouri and I looked at Everton at home, Southampton away, and West Ham at home, there wasn't one fixture where I thought, okay, I'm definitely going to get a clean sheet here. However, what I did think is that across the 3 fixtures, I could get one. Like, it was somewhat likely that I was able to get one. And I thought that over the 3, it was somewhat likely that I got an attacking return as well. He really could have had one against Everton. The corner in particular, which Pickford saved well off the line. And then the shot that the corner came from, well, like, it was just a little bit, had it been a little bit away from the defender's body, I think that's personally going in. Alternatively, he could have just played it to the right, and maybe he would have gathered himself an assist from there. So over the next 2, again, I wouldn't be surprised if I got a clean sheet or an attacking return. But Southampton away is a difficult place to keep a clean sheet, in my opinion. I think they've got enough attacking quality to hurt teams. And I say that in an absolute sense, right? Obviously, it's harder to go to the Etihad and keep a clean sheet. But Sulemana, Mateus Fernandes, even Onuachu to an extent with the problems he can cause, Tyler Dibbling, like, that's enough to hurt Wolves. And as such, I wouldn't view it as a game where you're definitely going to get a clean sheet. just because it's Southampton. I do not think you can interpret them like that. They gave Liverpool problems, and they will give Wolves some issues, I imagine, as well. But given he's got genuine upside due to his attacking threat, which is really good, even like he'll find himself in that left half space. It's not like he's just an old school wing back where he's just going to bomb up and down the flank. Like, he will come into the half space. You will find him even in like number 9 zones at times should Wolves need a goal. And as such, I think that he's a good buy, especially with like West Ham at home next. Again, West Ham could score. Of course, they could score with Bowen and Kudus and Paqueta, and like the wing back threat of Aaron Wan-Bissaka. That's a lot, but the reasons discussed in the Pickford section, it's not like they're nailed on. So I think it's good. Gabriel, I like the way I put it in everything you need to know. There isn't much that we have, Chelsea, that should cause them problems. I don't think our threat in transition is really there compared to what it used to being, because there's no Madueke and there's no Jackson in particular. And then even when they are in their mid-block / deep block, do we have the weapons to break it? Well, yeah, okay, we have Palmer, but in terms of the front three, like Neto will really struggle because you can't exactly put the ball into him. And he's not traditional number 9 where he's going to be able to manipulate and create a pocket of space for himself and just create a yard to get a shot off. Sancho, I think, helps. He's the associative type, and he's the type of guy you'd want to break down this deeper block. But he's not elite in that sense. I also think if he's to play off the right, you really want a left footer for this type of problem of the right-hand side. And then Nkunku, I don't think has necessary physical level to get into the game at the moment in the way I would like. Neto will hurt them in transition. Like that will be his route to points, right? But in general, they probably won't concede too many, and still they're very good in defensive transition. The best, to be honest, in defensive transition. So there isn't much for me to suggest that, like, okay, that we're going to hurt them. But like I said yesterday, they keep finding ways to mess up in the league. They draw away at Man United. They draw away at Nottingham Forest, albeit they played like pretty well, especially in the first half. They still drop points. They lose against West Ham. They play very poorly against Leicester for a lot of it. And because they keep finding ways to concede and drop points, I'm still somewhat hopeful that my midfield double up in Palmer and Neto will be able to get something. And I wouldn't have Gabriel on a free hit as such. And one of the big things with him is not just Arsenal's clean sheet record or his bonus point potential, but naturally his goals. But Saka was the one that really provided him with the goals. And Odegaard's delivery, the quality of it, is just not up to the same standard. So that doesn't help. And I've discussed before that when Marina plays, it's not good for him in terms of his box threat as well, because it's not just about him anymore, right? Marino can get on the end of them. So for me, I wouldn't have him on a free hit. I wouldn't be selling him, obviously, but wouldn't have him on a free hit. Then Robinson, again, like I don't really see why you'd have him on a free hit when you bring him in when he has Spurs on the Spurs side, which can attack and are attacking and have attacking talent. I don't really see why you'd bring him in. But if you've got him, then I think you have to play him with his assist potential. And the thing with Spurs is, like, you never know. They could just have a really bad day and he could rack up a haul. And that would be great, right, if you own him. But yeah, like, there's not too much to say. There's no way. I think it's very difficult to justify buying him on a free hit unless you have strong conviction that Fulham really put them to the sword. But not just that Spurs really don't create many promising attacks either. Which, to be honest, isn't like out of this world in terms of a prediction. But with the other options available, I find it difficult to justify a transfer in or on the free hit. I said to you that I was going to persuade you to try and take a hit, at least in many cases. So that is exactly what I shall be doing. Let's just assume that you have an asset that you're considering selling, and the realistic ceiling of him is 0 to 1 point. And that's the only reason you would be selling them in the first place, right? If their realistic ceiling is 0 to 1 point. Either because they don't have a fixture, or like Dango, they're probably going to be bench and come on for like 20, 25 minutes, and they probably don't return from there. So their realistic ceiling is 1 point. If you were to bring in another asset who you assume plays 60 minutes, and why would you do otherwise, he will score 2 points. So the gain is automatically +1, and then -4 for the hit, which makes it overall a -3 loss. At like the worst case is you lose 3 points. That's not that much. That's the absolute worst case. What makes it even easier for me to justify a hit in all these spots is you're not really going to be buying an attacking asset that you don't think is going to do well. Why would you do that? And or at a bare minimum, even if you didn't like any of them, you still have the fixtures of like Ipswich away, Leicester away. Brentford at home isn't as good, but I guess when you're Bournemouth it is. And as such, I will assume that the midfield or forward asset you bring in has the capability, somewhat realistic capability, to brace. And therefore, their ceiling is about 13 to 16 points. And therefore, you are presented with an upside of 8 to 12 points. For me, I have no idea how you can not take this on. it to me, it just seems like the most simple math. You have an upside of 8 to 12, and you have a negative, like a downside of 3. Plus, you probably want to be like aiming as high as possible in terms of rank. Everyone has different perspectives on that, and that I can't influence you with as much, or at least I won't try to. But just in that sense, it makes it so easy for me to justify. And that is pretty much every single scenario where I've seen, are you going to take a hit? Naturally, there will be like different ones. So for example, do I take a hit for Salah? And then I showed the conundrum yesterday. And that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult. And I encourage you to go and watch everything you need to know if you're in that situation where it's at wildcard 31 and retaining value and the prospects of game week 30 and captaining Salah then. But in like a Dango scenario, or in the scenario where you just have 10, for example, let's say you have Cunha or Mateta up top, I think you just pulled the trigger in basically every single case. I apply the same philosophy for defenders and goalkeepers. I think the ceilings are somewhat limited, but I personally think that if you have any level of conviction with defenders and goalkeepers, and I do think you need more with them because their ceilings are lower and so are their floors, particularly their floors, and I'd say that's the big thing. I would go for it if you have any level of conviction. Even for a goalkeeper, which I know people are somewhat hesitant to do, because from a mathematical perspective, it just makes sense to me, if not a strategic one as well. So here are my first 2 transfers, which constitute 2/3 of the -8 and give me a double up in midfield. Justin Kluivert and Antoine Semenyo are into the side. We shall not start with them, however. We will start with the Chelsea boys in Palmer and Neto. You will see that they are both present. I have made my decision. I'm happy to let go of Salah in pursuit of not just the upside, to be honest, but more so just because I think from an expected points perspective, my own, I think the fact that Palmer has an extra game and I get to captain a certain someone in game week 30, it just makes more sense for me because I prefer the fixtures, right? I prefer having those 2 fixtures over one. I prefer the Spurs at home to Everton at home. I like the fact that Jackson Madueke will be back for that Spurs fixture. That will definitely help Palmer. He'll also potentially be able to have a bit of a rest. His minutes in the international break won't be sky high, depending on who plays on the right wing or his fitness. But regardless, he should be able to rest a little bit. And as such, yeah, he stays. Neto's an interesting one because there's not too much to suggest outside of transitions that he should get returns against Arsenal. But like I find it difficult to justify selling a player for a hit who could return and is actually going to start the game, especially in a game week like this. So that's that. And they'll be staying. And you know what? I think between them, they can definitely get a return. And let's say they even get an assist and official on 7 points. I don't think 3.5 points and piece from these 2 is so bad in this type of game week. Foden, I mean, what am I going to do with him, right? He's one of the better prospects, I would say, this week if he starts. If he starts, he for sure is. And as such, I've held him this long. It makes sense to keep him this week. Why would I sell a half premium asset in a blank game week, especially when he serves as a differential? Probably staying. But let's come on to Justin Kluivert and Antoine Semenyo because I brought them in for Mohamed Salah and Dango Ouattara. We'll start with Ouattara. The reason I sold him is, like I said, I think he's not going to start. That's 1 point there. Well, downside of -3, upside of 8 to 12. I think Semenyo's got a 16-pointer in the locker. I really do. I know people won't be too happy with him because recently, especially if you've owned him, output-wise, he's really hurt you because he's just not producing in terms of goals and assists. But I think he's knocking on the door, and I think he's close, and I think he's just too good of a player. Like, his quality is a big thing for me. He's too good of a player to go on like an extensive run of no goals. Okay, fine, he could get really unlucky, but I'm just going to bank on the fact that he doesn't. And also, I think stylistically, like the amount of transitions that this game should theoretically have, this is a guy who can hurt. And I think a Van Nissen back will actually help him somewhat as well, just someone to link with, right? I think when you have Dango, you have someone who's more inclined to function solely as a runner. Don't get me wrong, like for example, the Liverpool game, right? He would drop in and help. But I think Van Nissen's linking is so much better. And I think that would help Semenyo if he ever chooses to run off. The actual move that Dango and Semenyo had against Brighton, like, I can see that happening a little bit more like that type of thing where Semenyo pushes on. And I really am like quite bullish over him on the next 2 weeks. And then Kluivert, I mean, all you have to do is watch the Spurs game, right? So good. Could have hauled. I really got away with one. And I have no intention of trying to do that again on penalties. And the other thing with these two is the Ipswich at home fixture in 30. It just makes it really easy for me. And look, I would like to have 11 players, right? So for me, when I have that view on Salah and Palmer and Haaland, it just makes it discussed them in more depth in everything you need to know, where I did a little bit of match analysis on them and Brentford, and you can go and see that in that video. And I certainly may have spoiled it in the last section, but I shall be bringing in Erling Haaland for Ollie Watkins as my final part of the -8. I like Worcester's prospects against Bournemouth. From an intellectual perspective, I like Worcester's prospects. I've got a feeling that like Bournemouth have quite a good day, and maybe he blanks, hence why I'm bringing both the Bournemouth assets. But that's more so feeling and intellectual. Worcester's more intellectual as opposed to feeling. But look, I'm not going to do anything with him there. On a free hit, honestly, I think, at least from an intellectual perspective, you can certainly justify it for the reasons I discussed in everything you need. And he looks sharp at the moment. Even though he didn't return against Aston Villa, he could have, and he's just always in the right positions again and again and again. The volume of actions in the final third is high. The volume of actions you would like in the final third, like the specific type of actions, where they are, what he's doing, you would like, the amount they create for him, the relationships he has on the pitch with Damsgaard and Schade and Mbuemo, and how that interacts with Bournemouth. There's points there for him, for sure. I think Bournemouth should theoretically win the game. I think they're also a better side than Brentford, but like I think his prospects are good enough. And then Haaland, look, the one thing that I am somewhat not so bullish on is the fact that like I do think that they'll go along to him a little bit more than they maybe would when they had the reverse fixture. I think he'll drop and link in, or drop to link in a little bit more, and you could see Marmoush running off him and then potentially profiting as such, whether that be from Haaland providing an assist or just vacating or just occupying a space, which means that Marmoush can occupy the vacated one like behind the line that would be created. That wouldn't surprise me, but overall, I just think I have to go with a big man up top. Penalties is a big deal, and also the fact that he's the best striker in the league, that's a big deal as well, right? And that, for me, that's non-negotiable. So, I will be going with Erling Haaland. Look, I could have gone Chris Wood or Omar Marmoush, or even a Van Lissen. Van Lissen, I felt like a triple up would have been a bit overkill, a bit of an unnecessary risk. I think Haaland's ceiling, as I expressed yesterday, is higher than Chris Wood's, and when it comes to the fact that I'm going to captain on, I think it's smart to go there. The other thing is I don't have Forest anywhere else. I don't have him in the midfield and I don't have him in defense. So from a strategic perspective, and this is more so strategic because I think they could definitely do well. They could definitely do well. Not necessarily will, because anything can happen, but also I think you've got to give a bit more credit to Ipswich and understand what Forest have, which is good. I just don't think it's like super great. I think it just would therefore make sense to go Haaland and fade Nottingham Forest entirely. And look, I could have gone Omar Marmoush, and I could have basically kept Mohamed Salah as such because I wouldn't have needed funds, but then I would have had to sell Isak for another forward in the form of Van Lissen, and I'd be losing value there. And to be honest with you, I just prefer Haaland and Semenyo by some way over, like, let's say, Van Lissen and Marmoush, especially when captaincy comes into play. Not just this week, but also in Game Week 30. As you can see on screen, Erling Haaland has the armband. I thought I'd just touch on Chris Wood a little bit because yesterday I said that he was my preferred captain marginally. I've shifted, hence the moves, to Haaland, more so due to, one, ceiling, and two, I watched a little bit of Ipswich, just a little bit, and I thought that they do have the capacity to make it difficult. Whether they do, I'm not so sure, but I think they've got it in the locker. Obviously, Brighton do as well, right? But like I said, without me having any other Forest, it makes sense to captain Haaland. I don't want to like go into that too much because it's not exactly the most complicated decision, and there's not too much past it apart from like the runner aspect, the tactical matchup, and the fact it is Erling Haaland and it's easy to trust him. You'll notice the vice captaincy is on Semenyo, and that's because I really am bullish of him embracing in, or at least hauling in one of the next two, or at least doing well. I am certainly expectant of getting a return on my investment there. Now we'll move on to Game Week 30, and then I'll wrap the video up. So what you will see here is a team which I haven't used a free transfer on, a team that has a 100% rating and a 98% game week rating. And it's a very strong one, right? Pickford away at Anfield, you'll be like, oh, that's not so strong. But I like it because I don't have Salah. Like, Everton have it in the locker to get a clean sheet there. Do I think they will? No, but like, at least I got a really high ceiling associated to that. And it's the best counter you can have to Mohamed Salah for that game week, right? Unless like Harry Branthwaite scores a header and gets a 15-pointer. I like the Pickford selection for that dynamic. Gabriel, Konate, Aït-Nouri, I mean, just makes sense, right? Like, who else am I going to play then? I'm not going to use a defensive transfer in that spot when they're so valuable down the line. We'll come on to that. They're also valuable down the line, and the unit's strong enough. Yeah, I have Konate at home to Everton. You know what? Maybe it gets a 15-pointer. Maybe it's a 0-0. And if it's not, then so be it. Whatever. But the attack, I mean, double Bournemouth at home to Ipswich. And I know people said that they think Dango could start because of how they have City sandwiched in the cup, but it is like a Saturday, Wednesday split. It's like a normal UCL Premier League split, like that time, in terms of like Wednesday, Saturday. I don't think that's that bad, especially with like how fit these Bournemouth players are, how well conditioned they are. I think both of them will play, especially given how important they are. And the fact that Bournemouth are going for the Champions League, especially if they get dumped out the FA Cup, that's even more incentive to try in the league, right? So that's that. I mean, Foden and Haaland at home to Leicester is fairly self-explanatory. Palmer at home to Spurs, self-explanatory. And I'm obviously keeping him for this fixture over Salah. Isak at home to Brentford again. And then the reason I've got Wissa is I'm not sure Neto will start with Madueke and Jackson back. He probably should because it's a game where there will be a lot of transitions. But even on the wing, I won't be as sure of his output as any of the other 7. And hence, I wouldn't make any other moves. It would be great to maybe move in for Eze and then bench Wissa. And that could happen. I just think that one free transfer down the line could be worth a little bit more when my attack is so strong for this week. And Wissa can absolutely score at St. James's Park. So that's the team there. Going on to strategy, I spent a long time today. And I mean a long time today looking at it. I even looked into free hit 36. So like wildcard 31, bench boost / triple captain 32, and then bench boost / triple captain 33. And then free hit 36. Couldn't quite make it work. But what I have like set my mind on, 80 plus, 90 plus %, is wildcard 31. I think it's so strong compared to the other strategies. And I really would consider wildcard 31 and its strength before going anywhere else and trying to wildcard 39, just because you have to take some hits this week. I would even rather wildcard 30 and gamble a little bit as opposed to wildcard 29. Just because of the type of assets you'd be bringing on 29 look quite different to those of 30. I just really consider that because when I did have a look, it was significantly harder. But I will post a draft in solving your problems. In terms of the rest of the chips, so for example, like the bench boost, the triple captain, the AM, and the free hit, I think the free hit can be played. So the strategy I'm looking at now is actually playing free hit 33 potentially. So it was like wildcard 31, bench boost 32, free hit 33, navigate 34 with just free transfers, and I'll be able to have an 11 and a strong 11 at that. And 35 is 35. 36, which could actually be quite an enticing double. I would have about like 6, 7 doublers, and then I would have 11, albeit this 11 I would have in 37 is not so strong. That team would be okay for 38. You would assume then the triple captain just gets played in 36 on Haaland when he has Southampton away and Bournemouth at home, assuming the highest probability fixtures. So that's the strategy for that side of things. I think obviously if you don't have the triple captain, no biggie, just don't use it in 36. If you have the I think it's a lot more difficult. It's a lot more difficult, but I would probably be more willing to use it at the back end of the season and actually forego a game, just because I think it could really mess with your team otherwise. But that's just like that's a rough thought. The rest of it that I've said is more structured. I've put some time into it. That's just a rough thought without having looked into it too much, which I shall do when time comes, and it's necessary for you to know so. And that is all she wrote for this one, ladies and gentlemen. I certainly did enjoy that, and I hope you did as well. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed, and equally subscribe as we're so close to 7,000 subscribers. Have a great day, and I shall see you tomorrow for solving your problems. Anything you would like me to discuss, which has not been done so already, please just let me know. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.